When you're dealing with these type of characters, these slaveholders or whoever, is it important for you? How do you establish empathy so that you can write about them and remove judgment? Because of course we're living in a later time where things have a long way to go, but have progressed significantly from where you're dealing with and where your characters are living. How can you separate your modern judgment away from those old values, or can you?
I guess it's hard to separate, what we just, feel so deep in our soul is this is so wrong. But it's interesting to just to hear their mindset. I mean, it's sickening. I mean, they call slavery a Christianizing institution, and these people are inferior, and they can't, we're helping them, and they can't provide for themselves. And I mean, like I have a whole section of slavery of like all these kind of comments so that I can kind of weave those in of people. But what I like to do, and what people say is the key to good writing, is showing, not telling, so that you're showing these people saying, showing them saying these horrible, bigoted, racist, prejudicial comments, and letting the reader decide, oh my gosh, this person is awful. So I'm not saying they're awful. I'm just saying this is what they said. You make up your mind what you think. And but I'm wanting the reader to say, oh my gosh, this is awful. How do they think that way? But it's just a much more effective way of saying someone's nice or someone's mean. Showing them being nice and showing them being mean, is carries so much more impact with the reader. So that's why, like, I like this character, Mary, Elizabeth's sister-in-law. I really want to just have her talking, and that's just how she was raised. That's the world she knows. And some of these other people, I mean, when Virginia seceded from the Reunion, there were all these Richmond society ladies outside on Capitol Square with champagne, toasting. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, they had no idea what they were doing. These people were, there were parades through the streets of Richmond that went on like 24 hours a day, with people with torches and singing Dixie, and bands singing La Marseillaise, and just the revelry was like unbelievable. Like, people closed their shops because everyone was just out in the streets celebrating. And there were fireworks at night. There were, I mean, and then Richmond became like an armed camp with all these soldiers flooding in from all over the place, as when Richmond became the capital of the Confederacy. But I just kind of want people to have the same reaction that I do reading this stuff, of just like, oh my gosh, just these people had no idea what they were doing, and just how deluded they were. And they thought, they're yelling things like, oh, we're going to march into Washington City and we're going to kick Lincoln out of the White House. And I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh, that happened right here. And
just thank goodness modern Americans would never try to storm the Capitol and create trouble.
Yeah, never put a a Viking helmet on, and
no, goodness no. We are modern civilized people. We would never do such a thing.
Well, you just realize though that people are people, and just how people the herd mentality of people. Virginia had just voted within 2 weeks before by a 2-1 margin not to secede from the Union. And then when Fort Sumter happened, and then Lincoln called up the troops, and then all this furor started, and these secessionists were great agitators. And that's a line I'm stealing from a book, but they were able to just gin up the crowd, and they controlled the media. And then also they tried to work on the women, that the patriotic women were the ones who wanted to leave the Union. So they got the women on their side, and the women were walking around with these like palmetto leaves to symbolize South Carolina, and every day of like, oh, I hope we're going out of the Union today. I can't live another day. And then they started making uniforms and all these things, but just kind of trying to get getting the support of the women was a big thing, but just playing on people's emotions. I mean, it was just a very volatile time with people were just infuriated that Lincoln was calling up Virginia troops that he wanted to send down to South Carolina to put down the rebellion. And they were basically like, if we're going to be firing our weapons at anyone, we'd rather fire them at the North than fire them at our Southern brethren. And so, who knows what would have happened if Fort Sumter hadn't happened. I mean, we'll never really know, but that was really the thing that blew everything apart. But at the time of Fort Sumter, there were already, I think it was either 6 or 7 states had withdrawn from the Union. And then after Fort Sumter, the border states, the other 7 withdrew. But, so it's like the Confederate States of America were not formed overnight. It took like, it was months. Whereas I kind of thought it was they all withdrew and, and it just wasn't, once again, it wasn't clear cut, at all.
Well, they're dealing with letters on horseback. Nobody's emailing anybody to make things happen immediately.
Well, yeah, and that's what's neat too, is realizing like they had the telegrams back then. So things would go by telegraph, and then the telegraph would go from like one station to the next station, and then it would get relayed from that station. So it would take like, 2 or 3 hours to get a telegram. But, that was like revolutionary. But like even with Fort Sumter happening, it was interesting because Richmond had just had these horrific rains and they had no contact with the outside world because the whole telegraph, they weren't able to receive telegraph. So people were just really freaking out, wondering, what's going on and all that. So that's what's kind of neat too, is just even finding out what the weather was like back then and what, what the circumstances were. So people were even, extra like ginned up because they were cut off from communication, and just, the whole city just exploded when they got these telegrams about Fort Sumter surrendering, and people had Confederate flags, all, every house had a Confederate flag in front of it. And meanwhile, Elizabeth Van Lew had this huge American flag in front of her house that she eventually had to take down for really her own safety. But she was the first person to put up, General Grant sent her a flag, and she was the first person to hang an American flag after the Richmond fell. So, and another neat fact was that because Jefferson Davis set fire to the Richmond when he fled, he wanted to set like Tredegar Ironworks and all the important places on fire so the Union wouldn't have control of them. But then the fire spread, and it was basically black Union troops who were the first ones to come in, who came and put out the fires. So there's some certain irony there. But yeah, so the Union troops were like, they were the ones who put out the fires. I mean, that's just amazing. So much of it, and they were trying to burn all the records and everything on their way out the door. But